Hi, hello. We are not live, but we are still recording a dungeon episode for you this week. This is the GM Talk Show where we talk about mastering the art of game mastering. And I'm Harlan Kelly.
And I'm Andrew Overdahl.
And as every week, we have a special guest with us today. This week it is Stefon, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Cool. From Paradice RPG. You are a player on the regular weekly game, and you also just recently DM'd for the first time on stream. Not DM'd ever, but DM'd for the first time on stream. Is that right?
Right. Correct. I don't think anyone, I mean, I'm sure there's individuals, but DMing for the first time on stream, first time DMing, like that's
I would love that. It would be so helpful to people because how terrible is every time I remember my first time DMing just like fell apart. It was so bad. It was fun. But anyway, we thank you for joining us this week.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
And we have a question that we ask to everyone as our kind of like first question, and it always takes us in different directions. So if you could let us know, what is your history with tabletop role-playing games? How'd you get into it? What got you started? How did it happen?
Where do we start? Well, first there was nothing, and then there was light. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to go that
far. We'll do it. Let's do it.
Oh God, I don't even know if I can do the first 7 days actually. But yeah, so D&D was always something on my periphery. I was always a big gamer, video games mostly, but like it never clicked. And then finally, like 3 years ago, some friends were like, "Hey, remember how we talked about doing D&D in high school and it never happened?" And I was like, "Yeah." And like, "How about now?" And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "But we need someone to DM." And I was like, "Cool. Who are you thinking?" And, they just looked at me and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah." Because I was always the guy that liked the rules. So yeah, about 3 years ago, I jumped straight into DMing. And ever since, it's been it's been an adventure, or a series of adventures, I guess.
That's impressive. You were I feel like so many people who have come on the show say like, I DM'd because I was the most excited about playing, or I wanted more games to happen, or like I just was the person to step up to do it. But then it's usually followed by, and then I was just the DM forever. But you have transitioned into being a player,
Yes.
Wonderful, impressive move, because you play every week on Paradice RPG.
Yep. Yeah. Mondays nights, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Come check it out if you want, or don't. You're your own person. But yeah, that was my first time really playing a character. I'd played in like random little one-shots or little knockoffs, but this was like my first dedicated campaign with a character. I was brought on last minute. I think our first stream was like beginning of October last year. And maybe 2-3 weeks beforehand, they were kind of like, someone fell through and they're like, my best friend from childhood, one of my co-stars, if you will, Tim, was like, "Oh, let's bring Stefon on. He loves that kind of stuff." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And like they already had stuff moving and they're like, blah, blah, blah. And then I met with the DM and he was like, "Here's my world. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't know, man." The magic happened, I guess.
Do you have a preference between being a player or being a DM? Like, if you had to choose one?
I think being a player, I definitely DM a lot more. But being able to just do like a little bit of prep for your character, being like, "All right, what am I doing this session? Where did we leave off? All right, cool, we're good." Whereas as a DM, I always feel that pressure to be like, "Okay, what is literally every single thing that can happen during the session, and how do I prepare for it?"
Yep.
Yeah,
it's a different energy for sure. Whenever I'm a player, I kind of look forward to it in the same way I would look forward to like, I get to see a cool movie tonight or something like that. And when I'm DMing, I look forward to it, but it's more in like, will I be able to pull this off? Like, it's different energy. Sure.
Man, and you were just talking about how like it would be super hard to DM for the first time on stream, but I think being a player for a dedicated campaign for the first time on stream is, if not as challenging, pretty freaking close up there. Like, have you what have you learned, do you think, now that you're playing this like long campaign and have had this attachment to the character and are kind of like going backwards? Like, have you learned anything from that would contribute toward
Yeah,
changes as DM?
I learned that you still need to prep as a player. I definitely went in the first few sessions like, I got my character sheet, this is fine. But like, I had like a very, very basic backstory. You know, I'm a cleric. He gets chosen by his goddess and he goes. That was the backstory. And it's, you know, not to say that you need a fully fleshed out backstory, but there's something that I said once and I thought it was inspirational. I'm sure it's been said before. It's not inspirational. I shouldn't say that. But
I'm probably going to feel inspired. So,
well, it was, so I was introducing some coworkers just 2 weeks ago to the game. They're all new players. And I was asking one of the players, like, I was like, all right, like, so, you know, what's your guy all about? Like, let me know a little about him. And he's like, oh, well, he's a human rogue. And I was like, no. Don't tell me what your character is. Tell me who they are. You know, and it's like, that's been said in a myriad of ways, but I think my phrasing might be a good one.
Yeah. What kind of bird are you? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's seriously such a, I feel like it's easy. I have had a very similar experience as you. Is I was primarily the DM in all of the D&D I played until I played one campaign for like a year and a half as just the same character, and I felt like, man, I learned so much just by like having the experience of sitting at the table and waiting for my turn in combat, and then like trying to pull something off and not quite working or whatever, and just like understanding how to kind of like pull those strings for the pacing for everyone was huge for me. So I think it's very valuable, and it's cool that you are getting to like display your progress with that too.
Yeah, it's true. And it's really nice because whenever I DM for a cleric now, I'm like, oh yes, I know what these things are. I know these spells. But for any other class, I'm like, I've once played a monk in a one shot. How many key points do you have?
Monks. I'm scared of monks. They're so, it's their own art, it feels like.
Yeah,
but yeah,
as
you're
a
right.
DM.
Yeah, you learn the game in a different way, which is
right.
Awesome. Yeah, which is the same reason players, if you're watching this and you're a player, you should DM. You should just do it. Try it out. You will learn things too.
Yes, you will have a different appreciation for the game as a whole, and also what can be done with it, I think.
Totally. I wonder if there'd be any value to having that your players, when they introduce themselves, they don't say their class. They just say who they are as players, and in their personality, like their class could like manifest through that, instead of just being like, I'm a barbarian, I'm a dwarf barbarian. It's like, okay, well, if you weren't allowed to say I'm a barbarian,
right,
how would you describe what kind of character you are, what kind of dwarf you are?
Yeah, I've heard of people doing session zeros like that, where they like RP as like just like classless beings, and then like due to things happening narratively, they can kind of like pick a class.
Discovering what they like. Yeah, I like that. That's
what
I was gonna do with the role-playing game at my daughter's school. I was just gonna have them do like the most basic ass D&D stuff, like go out and give me a survival roll to see if you could find firewood and stuff, just to get them into the swing of it. And then after that, there would be like a ceremony where they get to choose then their class, and then they become level 1 of that class, so they can at least learn it a little before they choose.
Yeah. Have you ever done anything like that, Stefon? Have you like done something that like I don't know, it's just like a wild idea and kind of like departing from the rules because of an interest of some sort?
I am a big fan of rules. My life doesn't always, I can be a little whimsical and stuff like that. So as I like to say, rules give structure. And in my games, I like a little structure because it's like, no, this is how it works. That being said, there are no rules for session 0 or session 1, and as it is, 5e is very much like, here are guidelines. You can take them as, creed, or you can play with them. And I definitely play with them to a degree.
Yeah.
But I really like that idea of like a session 0 where there is no class, or like, don't tell us what your class is, describe your character. as you were saying, Andrew, and like, if they're a cleric, what's their holy symbol? Don't say, and on their neck is a holy, describe what that is and what it looks like.
That's one of the areas of D&D that I personally, and a lot of people I know, barely get into, is like the religious stuff. So like a lot of clerics and paladins you meet, they're just like, yeah, I took this up, but it's like, they don't really get into the religion behind it. And it's fun when people do. I played with a player. He'd normally be watching this stream, but he played his paladin, and any chance he got in the game, he would be like preaching on the street and like like yelling at people, and he was just like all in on the religious side of it, and it really made the character so much more interesting than just like he's a holy knight or whatever. So I think dipping your toes into that stuff can be great. More than anything, I'm just like, if the players want religious stuff, we can get into it, but I don't want to, like, there's religions in the real world that are like, that's enough for me personally. I'm like, I don't need it. My fantasy is no religion. So, but if people wanted to, if my players wanted more of that, it's something I could research for sure.
So I guess like, have you ever come across a player doing something that is outside of your, like, if you're a super rules oriented person, like kind of outside of your comfort zone, and I don't know, how did you adapt to that? Because I feel like that happens to me all the time when players hit me up with stuff where I'm like, oh boy, I gotta think about that for a while.
There was something, and as you were saying that, I was forming a thought in my head, now it's gone. But I mean, luckily I've played with a lot of new players, so I'm kind of their entrance into it. I did just get as I was saying, introduce coworkers to the game, and it's my first murder hobo campaign.
Oh boy.
Which I am personally not a fan of that style of play, but I think it's helping me run combat encounters a little more interesting, because that's the focus of the game now.
They happen all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's actually helpful, because I like, one of my kind of like, I don't know, encounter philosophies is like, this has to be able to be passed, or you get through this encounter, different ways. Usually it's combat, stealth, or, not role play per se, but, talking, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I like to, monsters always, they have that liveliness to them where they'll talk to the players. They won't always attack first, but even if they do, you can like talk your way out of it or something. But no, these guys just go in, swords drawn already, and they see something move and they just attack.
Yeah.
Do you bring to bear consequences for that? Or is it just kind of like, all right, you guys want this style, go ahead and hack and slash your way through this?
Yeah.
Or is it like, there's consequences. You killed these town guards, and now these consequences will ripple out and come back to you.
Yeah, in the first campaign I ever played with friends, when I first started DMing, we were doing Lost Mines of Phandelver, and one of the characters got tired of the mayor, whatever his name was. He was constantly talking about the Red Brand ruffians. He was like, you guys got to help me, like, they've got me by the throat. And then, a scuffle broke out in the tavern when the Red Brands were causing trouble. The heroes, knocked some sense into him, and then the mayor was like, no, you have to take care of this now, they're going to bring retribution. And one of my players was like, you know what, screw this guy, like, I don't care. And he just pulled out a crossbow and shot him. And the chaos that ensued, it took a lot for the party. And luckily he just made the hit, and I was like, but he rolled shit for damage. He was like, all right, you shot him in the arm, now he's like freaking out, townsfolk are coming out.
And when you're in a published adventure like that, when somebody does something like that, hang on.
Right.
Yeah, I know it's
that happened.
That's exactly. That's like both the fun and the horror of it too. I can remember so many times when I was just like in my first year of trying to consistently DM, how many times I just felt like I'm like, oh no, I've lost the ability to give them anything, because like the things I had are gone away, and now I hear stories like that, and I'm like, oh boy, that means that now the town is mad at them, and there's this like person who's like like whatever. So it's it's now like fun to find those things, I think. Like, so when you were describing that, when you said like, oh, it's my first murder hobo campaign, I was like, oh boy, that makes me excited as a DM, because I was like, I've never had people who were like fully charging in there, you know. That's cool. That's cool that you two are kind of like treating it like that.
Yeah, it's a learning experience. That's what, you know, every session is just something that you gotta pull something out of it, even the bad ones.
Totally.
Yeah. I feel like in every table you sit down is a different game completely. You've got this tool set and everything, but like if one player's gone, it's a different game. If there's you know, one more person in the mix, it's a different thing that you have to figure out. Yeah, that's cool.
Totally. Stefan, you said that you run a streaming game of one shots, right?
Yeah, one shots in Paradise once a month. I am the DM for it, though. We might rotate at some point. It's just easiest to have one person start it. And then we invite people in from the community. So last 2 weekends ago was the first one. It was well received, and it was a lot of fun. And I put a lot more prep into that than my home campaigns. So
yeah, I'm excited for you and Andrew to talk about this too, because we were talking about it just a little bit before the call. But Andrew, you have also just recently started running games on stream too. Like, you know, we've been running these 10 Candles games, and this is the first time you've been DMing.
Those are the only games I've done ever on stream. Yeah, were these 10 Candles one shots for sure.
So I would love to hear from both of you how you think the experience of DMing at home and the experience of DMing on a stream is different.
Well, I think the biggest factor is that there's no, like, as a player in a stream, if you're kind of like whatever, if mentally addled, or you're kind of like chewing on something, you can just like step back and let other players take that spot on the stage, and it's imperceptible. Like, people don't, it goes very smoothly. But when you're DMing on stream, you can't, it's an entertainment product. You have to like be ready and on point and just keeping it moving. You can't be like, let's take a break, or let's do this, or like, interesting. And kind of like, it's just like the pace, I think, is different, and you're just, the spotlight is always there. It's a home game is so much more casual, and you can like take your time, and you can enjoy tangents and like the non sequiturs and things like that. But I feel like on stream, it's like, you just got to be on those beats. So it's definitely more stressful for me, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done a stream campaign as a DM. One shots are a lot more manageable, I think. My home campaigns, there have been so many times where something happens and I go, hey guys, I need 10, 15 minutes. I did not prep for this. Why would I have? You guys just threw it off the rails. Not that there were rails, but you know what I mean? Like, something happened and I was like, I want this to be done well. I could improv it. Maybe it's best to just give me those 10 minutes, and they're always fine with it. They're like, we'll just, shoot the shit. But you can't do that on a stream.
Totally. And in the game, we've been one-shotting 10 Candles. It's almost all improv. And even in the game, the players keep improvising stuff, and they can kind of change the rules of what's happening and stuff. So yeah, I get a lot of performance apprehension for 10 Candles, more so than other games, because in a D&D game I'd have it pretty specced out, and I'd at least have that feeling of like a safety net. But
right.
So, and Stefan, do you when you've done this, you've done one shot, right? Or is just one? Okay, cool. So what is like a moment from it that you found that was like, was there anything about the game, I guess, that you found easier because you were just like in there up on screen?
So it was weird. I definitely have a history of like, acting and stuff like that. Not like a huge history. I was the lead in my senior play in high school.
Oh, whoa. Hey, me
that
too.
Had, congrats.
Look at us.
No big deal.
But it was interesting. On stream, I was a lot more comfortable doing weird and different voices for the monsters, the characters, than in my home campaign, mostly because some of my buddies like to tease me, which is fine. I can take it. But that does at a point kind of make you, draw back a little.
Totally. Yeah, I've had that exact same thing where if the players make fun of voices too much, then I'm just like, okay, then you're just getting generic. I'm not going to go in on these voices anymore. I have the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that, how much is connected to like that like performance brain. Rather when with your buddies, it's that like give and take of like,
right.
When you're going, it's just like, all right, we can't stop this train. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're on, and that's the thing is it is so much more exhausting stream DMing than normal DMing. Like like I said, you're on for 3-4 hours, and then you're just like, it's done, it's over, all that work, and it's over.
Yeah, especially I was just thinking about this the other day about how I can't check in with players as actively as the way that I do in like and just not even on stream but over Zoom too, because I can't like watch people at the same time as much and just like get that sense of how people react to stuff and if people are having fun. So I get done and I'm like, was that good? Does anyone have an emotional reaction?
Having that body language in an in-person encounters is so much more helpful than, it's nice to see people's face, but you need that kind of, when someone tenses up literally at the table, you see that, everyone sees that, and it also, I think, engages everyone else more.
Right. Exactly. It pulls them in. That's super right. Yeah. So what's the thing that what's the number one thing that you feel like in your prep process that you feel like helped you on stream?
Everything. I'm not always, obviously any amount of prep is good prep, but I'm not always the best at prepping. My home players will tell you that. They get not disappointed, but sometimes they're like, really, Stefon? Mostly I don't give things names. I always forget to name things, and then I'm like,
but I feel like that's every DM's curse is them being like, what's your name, shopkeeper? And it's like, Conrad.
Yeah, they never ask the name of anything until the one, and you've got names for it all. And then, but yeah, so actually what it was for me was for the one shot, I mapped everything out. It was a very simple dungeon. It was supposed to be just a classic kind of like dungeon dive one shot thing. And then I, tweaked it a little and made it less dungeon divey and more like almost like a it's a small world kind of ride. Like, it was on rails, but you could interact with it in ways.
So that's the best dungeon, especially for a one shot. Like that, those like both rails but choices balance.
Yeah. They can pull the lever to go down a different doorway or something, or they have to collect, the MacGuffins to get a different ending. But yeah, mapping it was really good for me because I'm always good at like spatial explanation. So like being able to see that on a map for myself, I was like, no, it looks like this and, is arranged like this. And I think that's really important when you're doing theater of the mind, is making sure that everyone's on that same page, at least for the space. What the characters look like, what exactly the interior looks like is okay. But as long as you have like it's this sized room and this is how it's laid out, even if their image of like the display cases or the bookshelves is different, who cares? A bookshelf's a bookshelf.
Yeah, it sucks when you're in the middle of combat and everything screeches to a halt because they're like, wait, I thought there was like hallway behind me. It's like, no, you moved over here and you're trapped up against the wall. And then, you have to kind of like hash that out. So yeah, I think that's super important, is to like, as long as you can see it and describe it, and then it's on them to remember it or not, as long as you describe it fairly.
And you end up giving them better details too. When you like have that map in front of you and you say like, yes, to the left is a door, to the right is a hallway, and there's like some dripping in that hallway because there's an ooze down there or whatever. Then like all of a sudden you can like leave out a bunch of flavor that you would normally, if you're just like making stuff up, like fit in there, because you're like, I'm communicating these things.
Right, so, the important elements. Yeah.
Totally.
That's smart. I'm gonna do that.
Totally. Well, we have a roll table here, Stefon.
Okay.
If you have a D20.
Wouldn't it be caught with that one?
Yeah.
Good.
And we'll pick a question from it.
So yeah, we change out the one, but besides that, our questions stay the same. So what'd you get?
I got a nat 20.
Oh,
So if that's not telling of how well this interview is going, I don't know what is.
look at that.
Wow.
A
Have we
good
ever had a
omen.
nat 20?
I don't think so.
I don't think we
I
have.
will
Is
admit
this it?
it was a little cocked on
Oh.
a towel cloth here, but
We'll give it to you. We'll give it to you. That's amazing. I think this is it.
Wow.
This is our inaugural Nat 20.
So
So
the nat 20, the tables turn, and you get to ask us any question you like.
oh shit.
That's what happens on the nat 20.
All right. Then for both of you, my question is what is in your mind the defining moment of your DM or GMing career? What was like that
Oh,
one
wow.
thing that you hit it so fucking well? You were like riding that high. Your buddies might still talk about it, or at least you remember it.
Wow.
I'll go first because I know
Okay.
mine's easy. Is I have this tattoo of it, which is why I
Really?
cheated. Yeah, it's like in here because it's a player character that it was like my first campaign. It was we play monthly. It's been going for 3 years. Like they're my best friends in the world, and we played with these characters for 2 years, and there was this big fight, and 2 of them died, and it was so surprisingly emotional. But the thing,
Yeah.
it turned into this big thing where the cleric only had 1 diamond to use Revivify and had to pick between 3 player characters, and one of them is his like actual real life partner, and he was like sitting next to them. And so the thing that was like, I don't know where this came from, and I love it to death, and I'm so proud of it, is I was like, cool, let's do a flashback scene where you're all sitting around the fire in your travels and talking about how each of these all of your characters would feel about being brought back. And so you can kind of like make you all can have this conversation in character then, because it kept this like tense moment out of real life dynamics, and in like how does your character feel like this, and it lets the player choose. It takes the weight off of one player and like kind of like lets it be a discussion. So that's the thing where I'm like, always find ways to let your players' characters make big decisions. Is my like thing.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's
great moment.
That's a good one. I don't know what mine. It might be. I had 2 to think of, so I'll go with this one. It was actually a solo game, and I actually really like solo games. I think they're pretty fun, and it lets players expand their characters so much. But in this solo game, this character was captured pretty early in the game. He was caught, and he was going to get caught no matter what. He was caught, and but anyway, he ended up in this cell, and almost pretty much the whole game was him just having this conversation with this character from his backstory, who would like come to visit him and stuff. But it just like worked really well, and it was just that sort of like natural conversation, and it got like way more emotional than either one of us thought it would, given because it didn't. But like as these like details came about his character, because he wanted to play an amnesia character, that classic like get out of jail free backstory of like I have amnesia and I don't know my backstory, so I created his backstory, and in this solo game he basically was learning that from this figure who had like captured him.
Interesting.
And without going into all the details, but yeah, it was basically just this conversation with a guy who was in a jail cell, who was not getting out, had no way to get out, and it was just like pretty impactful and just a good session. And at the end of it, he got nailed to a tree, and then in the follow-up game, the other players had to come try to rescue him, which they did. So but it was pretty crazy to see those 2 storylines kind of pan out. They had no idea what had happened to him.
So you got to give us yours now then, because those are so fun to say. I know we're cheating. We're turning,
and we can wrap up. Yeah.
I guess it has to be from the one shot I just did. It's freshest in my mind, but the gist of it was this old battle mages vault with all their magic items, and the whole thing was at the end they were going to open the vault, and the head of the order locked himself in there, made himself a lich, but didn't have souls to sacrifice because he was just trying to guard the vault content. So he became a demi-lich. However, his familiar, a pseudo dragon named Imagination, or affectionately called Immy, was still there waiting. So the party did all the right things, where they befriended the pseudo dragon, opened the vault, and this demi-lich is about to kill him, and then Immy pokes his head around the vault door and is like, the demi-lich is like, Immy, it's been so long, you know, it was a whole thing. And then because they were reunited, the demi-lich like gave up on life. I described the crystals cracking, tears coming down, and like it was, I had planned for, like, I was like, this will happen, but I didn't like actually write it out.
Yeah.
And what came out was a lot better than I think I could have pre-written.
Because you just feel it, like you're connected to the moment.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. And even if you do have stuff a little written, it's cool to be able to like, I'm just going to divert. I'm just going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
There. Well,
Man, that was fun.
great. Yeah. Thank you so much for.
No, thank you guys.
Congratulations for being our first Nat 20.
Woo, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to plug? You plugged your show, but do you want to plug it again now here at the end?
Yeah, sure. Paradise RPG, our flagship show, as they call, which I don't know why they say that. Advantage in Paradise, Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern time. My next one shot will be November 21st, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Come check us out.
We will.
21st. Yeah.
We'll social it. We'll find it. We'll do it. We'll make sure they get there. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
It was my pleasure.
And and Harlan and I have a show, Better Than Heroes, Mondays at 7 Pacific. So coast to coast, we've got you covered.
Look at that.
Yeah, you can just watch D&D all day.
Don't
do anything else. Yeah, do it.
I love it.
Cool.
But thanks for watching, if you're watching this on YouTube, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See y'all.